Welcome to the Nephology podcast. I'm your host, Joe David, and I'm the founder and CEO of Nephos Group. On this podcast, we talk to founders, innovators, disruptors, and entrepreneurs from all across the globe who are building in Web3, technology, and finance. And if that's something that you're interested in, please hit that subscribe button to make sure you don't miss out on any of the latest episodes. Now on to the next episode. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Nephology podcast. We are back in Dubai recording again after a brief stint in South Africa, and delighted to actually welcome back Manpreet. Manpreet, how are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to have you here because we're gonna touch on some more, I say specifics, but some kind of more kind of actionable kind of certain areas that that's kind of developing and stuff here in the UAE. So I think that's going to be amazing for people to listen to. So for those that maybe didn't watch the first episode, and obviously you've changed positions and things like that since we spoke last, but yeah, maybe you could give a quick background into you and then Neolegal as well.
Sure. So I'm Manpreet Kaur. I'm a director of licensing and regulations at Neolegal, a law firm that's been established here for over 3 years now. Neolegal is a blockchain, crypto, digital assets, specialized law firm. So we work with, as well, high net worth individuals. We work in the gaming space as well. We work on the traditional finance side of regulations as well. So with other regulators like DIFC, ADGM, and obviously VARA on the digital asset side of things. My kind of background, I come from a Big Four background in the UK, having worked with KPMG and transitioned over to the UAE via PwC. So I joined the digital asset world back in May 22 and was on site with VARA basically from pretty early on in their embryonic stage.
Yeah, nice. And what brought you, just to get onto that, what brought you to the UAE? Was it solely the job, or was there other
things? I'd made an investment in Dubai in 2021. So during the UK lockdown, COVID lockdown, I had invested in a property here.
Okay.
And it was a very off the whim purchase. It wasn't a very well thought out one. It was like 5-bedroom house in the UK or a really nice holiday home in Dubai, and Dubai won. And what led me to making that move was I was informed by MR early that my property's ready, and I was like, okay. So in the beginning of January 22, I decided to start looking for work in the region. And through a colleague, I got told about this new and exciting project that PwC were working on, and they were looking for somebody with a very anything and everything kind of skill set mindset, and somebody who wasn't so driven by a job description. And I was introduced to PwC. We had a conversation, and then the job kind of led the final move over here.
Yeah, okay. So PwC had the VARA opportunity, because
yes.
obviously they started off very much intertwined, as it were.
Yeah.
And then you were kind of like, oh, great, there's an opportunity here for something. And at that point, crypto and digital assets was not your forte, shall we say?
I had no idea. I remember asking Dan, who had interviewed me at the time, what do I need to know before I land? And he gave me some things to read up on, and I was reading on the flight over. So it's probably a bit of a running joke, but I've always been, whenever I met anybody, I was like, yeah, I'm not the SME on digital assets, and I still probably don't profess to be one today. But it was a lot of learning. I didn't know anything. So that was my introduction to digital assets. The first day I went on site with VARA, they were already well into drafting the MVP conditions at that stage. And that was my first intro to digital assets, really, was the drafting of the MVP conditions.
Which I imagine was probably quite a lot of people at VARA in that stage, right? I imagine
the actual VARA team was 4 people.
Yeah, okay. And I imagine all of them weren't, former traders in crypto. No. Do you know what I mean? I imagine it was very much a professional-led approach of how do we do this professionally.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was so successful, though, because it was a business lens looking at it. I feel like if it had been a group of regulators, the regs would not have come out for another 2-3 years. No. Whereas the mandate and being more business-minded drove people to getting them out within 12 months.
Yeah, I agree. And you could probably look at EU with MiCA, that took ages to come out because a lot of lawmakers making it. The UK right now is taking ages to get stuff through, and even the US, although they've pushed things now, Trump's there, it's still taking time. Like, how long has this Clarity Act been spoken about, and we've still not got it?
Still not got it. And I think this is the reason why VARA was formed in the beginning anyway, is because they were waiting, the UAE was waiting for other jurisdictions. You had Japan, you had China, you had MiCA, you had the UK, and they were waiting to see what other jurisdictions bring out. But nothing was coming out solid, and it was taking time. And then the mandate was, look, we need to get this done. We have interest. We have global VASPs that are really keen to maybe establish here in the UAE. Let's make it happen. And then it was like, if we're going to do this, we have to do this within so much time, because then we will just be tarnished with that same representation as everyone else. That, they're a typical regulator, they take forever. And, that was not what VARA was aiming for. And I think they more than proved themselves in that 12 months.
And I feel like they've kind of carried on that mantra as well. They're always very quick to, publish. I say quick, but in a positive way, to publish updated guidance or updated rule books and things like that in the grand scheme of things. And if you think of somewhere like the UK that's still in a consultation phase of what their regs are going to look like, VARA's had iteration after iteration. And I kind of liken it to our business. When we first got into crypto, we saw an opportunity in the market that nobody else was taking. So we were like, we could wait for everyone else, but then we're behind and this and that. So we just got to go for it. And that's kind of where VARA sat, right? And so now we're iterating our product, and it's probably the same for Neo as well, whereas a lot of law firms will be catching up.
Yeah, so a lot of law firms here. So you've got a lot of the global players, and some of them have great teams in-house that are focusing on digital assets. But ultimately, there isn't many crypto digital asset focused law firms. So that is definitely where Neo Legal is ahead of the game. The managing partner has been part of this industry well over 15 years probably now, and he's very well strong and established in the space. One of his unique elements is he really understands the technical aspect as well, which we've been finding that not as many lawyers are as familiar with. They can understand the regulatory piece, the compliance, the legal, but the tech element and the technology piece is such a huge part of any digital asset application.
100%.
So that's definitely where we've evolved our product. So where we've got the team that really lead on the compliance, the regulatory, the drafting, the tech. Then you've got myself who understands the industry, has really good relationships in the ecosystem. We're evolving the team as we kind of see as the regulations evolve, we evolve as well.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. And I guess we've spoken about VARA. We should probably just frame the regulatory landscape here in the UAE, because we've said VARA, but people may not even know what VARA means or who they are. But obviously there are other kind of regulators, and it's a bit different here. It's a bit like the US, where you've got state by state regulation, and then you've got federal. Like for anyone listening in the UK, we don't really have that.
No.
So it's a different model as well. In a sense, emirate by emirate as well as federal. So maybe we could just touch on the overarching. And then people will understand.
Okay, so from a federal level, you have CMA, which was formerly known as ESCA. So that's the federal level regulatory body, and they basically regulate the digital asset space, except Dubai.
And so, CMA, just for clarity, is Capital Markets Authority.
So the mandate from, the delegation of authority from CMA is to VARA, Virtual Asset Regulatory Authority of Dubai. So VARA regulate digital assets in the Emirate of Dubai. And then we have the traditional financial regulatory body. So we have ADGM, who focus on Abu Dhabi. We have the DIFC, which focus on the free zone within Dubai. So VARA regulate everybody within Dubai except the free zone DIFC.
So the complication here is you've got the CMA regulate everybody but Dubai, VARA regulate everybody in Dubai but DIFC.
And the other thing is DIFC and ADGM, they're both regulators, but DIFC is also a free zone. And then you also have free zones. So you've got Ras Al Khaimah, you've got they are a free zone, but there are crypto companies that are not regulated because they're not at that point of regulation that are sitting in rack under that free zone.
Because they don't fall under the other regimes.
No, or they don't fit into it right now, and they're very embryonic stage. They're a startup. They're not actually doing anything from a activity point of view. They're maybe focusing on their tech, their product development before they go into the regulatory phase. So it is complicated for anybody who doesn't know the UAE, who doesn't understand why is it split. Not only is it split at federal level, then you've got an emirate that's split up by free zones. And then it's which free zone do you go to? We obviously, within Dubai, there are certain free zones that are very much at the forefront when it comes to digital assets. DMCC have their crypto tower, which I know you're also based in.
Yeah.
We've got DWTC, they've got their incubator, we've got the block over there.
Yeah.
And then we've got Maidan and IFSA, who have some VASP license there as well. So the key kind of four are those four that are really actively doing the commercial licensing for digital asset companies right now.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I guess just to touch on, something that's come up to me in the past and just to kind of get some clarity on it. So obviously if you're a prop trader in Dubai, you need to get an NOC, so no objection certificate from VARA, right? If you're in Ras Al Khaimah, you obviously don't need to get one from VARA because you're outside of Dubai.
Yeah.
But is there anything with the CMA now where they've come out with their kind of newer regulations where anything around that, or kind of prop traders still free to roam, as it were, if they were in somewhere like Ras Al Khaimah?
I think free to roam, no, because even VARA I know that there's been a lot of VASPs that are now going through renewals for their NOC. There is more scrutiny. There's a real look at, are you using your own funds or are you touching any client funds, which is a really key differentiator. Because if they're touching client funds, that moves them into a different bracket. It moves them into a licensed activity, broker-dealer. With the CMA, it's still very early days. People are still trying to understand and interpret the regulations. I think it's ultimately... it should fall under CMA. In all honesty, I think there needs to be that regulation, because otherwise, if not, we're going to have prop traders using the opportunity to get a commercial license, but as a guise rather than actually truly a crypto company. And for the safety of the ecosystem, for its consumers, the regulation is there to protect everybody. And I think in the future, we will see prop trading become a regulated activity, be it in a subset of VARA's requirements or be it in a CMA have got a smaller set of requirements. I don't think they'll have to go for the full VASP license.
No, of course, yeah.
Because that doesn't make sense.
No.
But there will be something. But at the moment, under VARA, if they're in Dubai, as you said, they've got to get the NOC. I think anybody going for that NOC or going for a renewal needs to be prepared for extra scrutiny. And then I think on the RAC side, I think definitely CMA will crack down on it.
Yeah, and at the moment, though, they don't need to get an NOC and RAC from CMA or anything
not right
like
now,
that.
no.
Yeah. And it was interesting, actually. I was talking to someone from RAC the other day, and they were saying that, which I hadn't really thought about until they said it, but when I talk about proprietary trading, I think about what we've just spoken about, which is trading your own capital with your own decision making, et cetera, et cetera. He was then saying that they're getting people that are going, well, I'm a prop trader, and they're calling proprietary trading being using their own proprietary software. And I was like, that's very interesting, because you're then you are using customer funds.
Yeah.
But as far as you're concerned, it's your proprietary trading algorithm, as in the one that you've built. And I was like, that's the
funds element is what fundamentally changes
exactly.
it.
Yeah. But it's a very how people use these words slightly differently in their businesses, and that's the tricky part with
Everybody's
these regulations.
Regulation is, we're so used to it in a traditional finance point of view. So if you're doing anything with traditional finance, banking, etc., you need to have a license. With digital assets, there's still a fraction of that industry that don't want to be regulated. No. They have their reasons for it. So ultimately, they're going to interpret the regulations how they want to interpret them for their benefit.
Yeah.
And then that is the job of your regulators to crack down on that and police it. And I know, we know that VARA has their enforcement teams. I'm sure CMA will have their own team as well, who will now start looking into these kind of things. And I think what would be really good is guidance. You know how we have the marketing guidelines? Is to have some, a guideline, a guidance manual for prop trading.
Yeah.
Because then it makes it more clearer as to what the regulator considers prop trading, what activities, is it the software, what the definition is. I remember in the early days when we were licensing VAS as well, one thing that used to come up a lot was around software. So I'm developing a product that I'm taking to market that is for a digital asset company. But as a product and as a software developer, I'm not actually doing the activity, but I'm providing you the product do I need a license? Well, you're considered a service provider. But the minute you start doing the trading of any funds, then you're going to need to become licensed. It was such a fine line in the early days to define that.
I think that's even, like, we had a brief conversation a few weeks ago around a company that was looking to come here, and they provided the software, and then you effectively non-custodially connect your wallet to their software, and then you make a decision. But the challenge with that is, like, you are kind of driving people towards a decision, because your software is part of their decision-making process. So then it is a fine. I think that one we decided might be okay to be outside for the moment, but it would be worth, speaking to VARA, maybe trying to get an NOC or something like that. But, that is the challenge, is that because this technology, it's very new and innovative and whatnot. There's so much around self-custody as well. So how does that sit? It's such a difficult one. I've
always said, where there's doubt, err on the side of caution and apply for an NOC. Because it's better that you're on their radar, on any regulator's radar, in a positive way, as seen as being forthcoming and proactive, than them come to you and question you, right? Because then it seems like you've got something to hide. Yeah. So I'm a lot more cautious. I will always advise on that side is get yourself going, but also go and apply for your NOC. Put yourselves in the best foot forward, rather than having to be on the back foot.
No, and that makes sense. And it is a sensible approach. The NOC process, do they have that in other jurisdictions? I don't know I can't imagine the FCA
seen it in the UK
giving an NOC.
No,
because it's quite an important thing, really, when you think, and again, I think we spoke about it, but like, if you get the regulator to say, we have no objection of you doing what you're doing, but you don't need to be regulated. Like, that's quite a big thing, and I've never really heard about it.
I've never seen it. Genuinely, I haven't seen it in other jurisdictions. I think the reason was because there was so many people, like I referenced earlier about tech providers, so many people that was companies that were unsure, and it allowed VARA to say, okay, we assess you against the regulations and the requirements. We don't deem that you need one right now. However, the onus is on you. If you change your activity, if you change what you are doing as a business, you need to evaluate again and notify us.
And so that's ongoing, right?
That's ongoing. You can't. It's not just an annual thing when you get your renewal. It's
that's important to know.
It is on you as the company, I suppose. You're not a VASP unless you're a licensed VASP, but you as a company and in a business, your compliance, your legal need to be regularly looking at what you're doing and saying, guys, right now we are touching, we could borderline be considered needing to be regulated. We need to speak to VARA. And it is a conversation you can have with the regulator. You can approach them and say, look, this is where we're at, but this is where we're going to go. Do we need to get licensed? And you have that conversation. What I find is there's so many people, I understand there's cost implications, time implications, operational costs, going to market and all of this that have to be factored in. And as a business, and you're a businessman, you know what this is like. You want to just, your profit, your bottom line matters. But it's better to kind of do that analysis than get to a point where you've gone gung-ho and then someone slaps you with a fine instead.
Yeah, it's similar when we talk about tax. You're better off declaring it properly in the first place and then being able to enjoy the fruits of your labour than, pretending you didn't do this or you didn't do that and then having to pay a huge fine and loads of tax in the future and you go, I don't have the money anymore. So, but that, it's an obvious thing when you say it, but it's an interesting point that people might need to just bear in mind, that like they might get an NOC today which covers them today, but it's an ongoing kind of monitoring, if you like, and if they let's take a prop trader not taking client funds and then they start taking client funds, it's not just we can wait till renewal to get licensed, right? They should then in theory get licensed immediately. So that's quite an interesting thing for people to think about. So, and obviously now you're on the outside, right? You were on the inside, you're now on the outside. Like how, I guess on both sides, how did you feel being inside initially and like building something and like working with, service providers that were trying to understand it, and now being a service provider, I'd be interested to get your take on both sides.
Very exciting. I've always said someone used the terms of this is a once in a lifetime project. And this was the second one in my lifetime I'd worked on. So it's pretty amazing to be given another opportunity to do something that hasn't been done before. Being on the inside, it's very intense. There's a lot of demand, a lot of learning, trying to balance what the market needs and the ecosystem, but also remembering you're a regulator. There's a really fine line and balance. And being on the inside, then you get the information a lot quicker. Because you can go to your colleague and ask them a question. You can go knock their chair and be like, hey, by the way, or, it was a lot easier to resolve things and then provide the service providers with the information they needed. Whereas they're being on the outside, particularly for myself, and I'll talk about my experience, it was a very, it took time for me to understand the best way to operate. Because one, I'd been inside, I'd worked for VARA. So you don't want to be, there's market perception, there's how you're perceived in the market, and you want it to be fair. Like, you don't want to be seen as favoritism and things like that. So I was always trying to be very respectful of the VARA team, not take advantage of the team that I knew, and try and approach it in the right way. And I also used to listen and remind myself of how we would feel when I was on the inside, and try and be mindful of that behavior, and not become like I didn't want people to be with me.
Yeah, I think that's really important.
It's a really fine line. And then over time, like I've got really good engagement. I follow all the processes that VARA do. When I've had the opportunity to meet with the team, I will check in, okay, what's working well, what's not working well, how do you prefer this to be done? And the great thing is, sometimes we'll have certain questions. We've been able to request a meeting with the right people at VARA, and then they've come on the call and helped us unpick things with clients to give them the right direction. Because sometimes we don't have all the answers. We'll have the best answers, but we're also not afraid to go and say to VARA, we think you need to kind of give some guidance on this as well. So I'd say it's definitely, I can't just pick up the phone.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
and I think that's one thing.
But that's a respect thing from you as well. You, out of respect to them, you don't want to be that person, because you know what it would be like on the other side if that person was calling you. Yeah.
One thing that definitely changed was my WhatsApp notifications definitely reduced after I left, which was a blessing, to be honest. And in a good way. But there's communication channels. I use the ones I have. I try to be very respectful of those. On the other side as well, I'm working with SMEs that really understand the space, right? The team that we've got, the knowledge we have in-house is phenomenal. So sometimes, it's more just talking to people in the peers in the ecosystem. Sometimes you and I will bounce off each other. Other colleagues that I have in the industry, we'll pick up the phone and we'll hash it out and work it out. We've had, more recently we worked with Simmons on Animoca's license, and it was great working with Adam and his team. It was always a phone call, let's work this through, and then we worked with Animoca on it. That was a great experience working with Simmons. And again, they'd been part of that VARA journey from day one.
And Adam's a great guy as well. So,
fantastic. The team, Mariella and everyone were really good. So it worked really well working with them. And they're like, how can two law firms work together? Well, actually we can, because we worked on one area, they worked on another, and we brought it together. So it worked really well.
Yeah, no, that's good. So I guess moving then on to the kind of present day, if you like, in terms of where we're at. So, VARA, obviously we talked about CMA briefly coming out with their own regulations, but VARA have been I say changing, it's probably not the right word, but they've been updating, probably the right word, their rule books and stuff. So maybe we could just walk through the last, as far back as we can, but maybe,
months,
the last 12 months of what's developed, what's changed, and what people need to be aware of now.
So, 12 months ago, they brought out Rulebook 2, version 2 of all of the rule books. And in that, we saw a substantial change to the issuance rulebook. So you've got Category 1, Category 2. Initially, with issuance, we didn't see much movement and anyone licensed under issuance, under version 1. But with version 2, we've seen a number now of VASPs obtain the Category 1 license, Pripco, Control Alt, and they've kind of led the way, and Tokenvest as well. Have significantly led the way and are very involved in that space. So the evolution of Rulebook 2 really brought out more of the RWA, AVI, AVAR, VASPs, the VASPs that want to deal with ARVA and RWA. And we've seen a huge uptake in inquiries around RWA as well, real-world assets. What can we do with them? And what we've realised is that there's a number of us that really want to launch a token, but don't necessarily understand what's needed for that. So then we have started doing a lot more kind of deep diving with them, some more structuring first before if it's a broker dealer, we can pretty much tell this is what it is, crack on, let's get on with the work. But with tokenization, we do a bit more of a deep dive, maybe structuring first, because Some of the VASPs might then benefit more from actually using a controller, a token vest.
Yeah, okay.
Right, to issue the token.
Yeah.
And then it might mean they need a different license, and then we work out what do they actually need.
Yeah.
There are still some VASPs that are using offshore as an option as well. So that's where the team will bring in the team that are really strong on that side, and they then unpick that with the clients.
Well, just to finish on that quickly, what do you think was the main driver? Because you said that not many people were licensing under the first version, but under version 2 more. Was it a VARA change, as in like in their mind they had more clarity on what they could license, or was it the entities themselves? Like, what do you think was the main...
I think it was more of a VARA thing, as in they were evolving the structure and the framework and the guidance.
Yeah.
I think what they had initially was good, but it needed to be more solid for the different types of assets that people were wanting to tokenize. And obviously the UAE, Dubai, is not tokenizing everything and anything, right? There's got to be some cultural awareness.
Yeah.
We are in the UAE.
Yeah.
So there's been some interesting projects I've heard that have come and gone as quick as they've come because it's just not suitable for the region. I think it's just the VARA side needed the structure, the process. The process is slightly different. There's an element of more due diligence. I would say right now it takes longer on the issuance side to get an issuance license than it does the other activities as well.
Okay.
Your white paper is a big factor. So there's a lot more elements to fight. So I think that needed to be in place from a VARA side before then people could go through that process end to end.
Yeah, makes sense. So we had that 12 months ago, and then recently we've had derivatives.
Yeah. So under the exchange rule book, we've got now version 2 of the exchange rule book with derivatives.
Okay.
So VARA were running a pilot program on derivatives and have now transitioned from pilot to full market.
Okay.
So now VASPs can apply directly for derivatives. You don't have to wait to get a license and then apply for derivatives, because whilst the pilot was running, it was get your license and then you can then request to be part of the pilot.
Okay.
But whereas now VASPs can go straight ahead and go for derivatives.
And that's just an add-on effectively to if they're doing the exchange license, they can then add on. And cost-wise, is that an additional cost onto the license just included in
same cost?
Okay.
It's more of there's capital requirement considerations. There's more cost to the VASP.
Yeah,
in an operation
yeah. But licensing fees.
But licensing fees are the same.
Yeah. But it is you don't just get it. You do have to make sure that
you still have to go through the full due diligence. You have to declare it in your IDQ, in your business plan, and it needs to be present in all of your documentation, your policies and procedures that are relevant.
And that I think is important, because when they include something in something else, it's sometimes think, oh, well, if it's included, then I can just go for the exchange license and I get derivatives.
We've got like a number of VASPs that wanted to apply for derivatives, and because of the different stages they're at, they've decided to get their license and then write to VARA and request to now provide the documentation for derivatives. We've got some that are doing it from day one.
Yeah, so it's still possible to...
So it's still possible,
Yeah, to do it the other way, which is to get it licensed first and then add derivatives on after. So like you say, for some people, if they want to get to market quicker and a kind of lower cost overall, that route is still, I guess it depends on the business, right?
Yeah, and their appetite. And like one of our VASPs, they're multi-activity, they're going for, so for them, they're like, okay, let's carry on with the track we're on and then let's go for it afterwards.
Yeah, makes sense. And so the other thing that I've noticed, and it's kind of touched on where we kind of work together, is that the whole process seems to be a lot more thorough.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a good way. Not that it wasn't thorough before, like they were still very thorough before, obviously, but it just feels like the whole process now. And even, we work on some areas together. And like, we will take on some of the financial prep work because that's quite heavy now.
Yeah.
Where have you seen that process? And we can touch on the financials as well, but, they seem to have been much more robust across it.
So we about, I would say, nearly 12 months ago, towards the end of September time, started to see a lot more questions coming back on phase 1 IDQ. So the RFIs were a lot more detailed. A lot more questions. Earlier this year, VARA launched VARA Connect, which has moved phase 1 from an offline process to an online portal process. So you submit everything through their VARA Connect process. And that has made it a lot easier, because the way in which you submit the information, the way you see the information, I'm sure it's made the case officers' jobs a lot easier as well. And we've seen more recently then, therefore, more I would say, really focused questions, but the volume has got less. And I almost feel like the new IDQ form does drive you to give better answers.
Okay.
And we give our VASPs that structure from day one.
Yeah.
And it really helps them hone in on the business plan more. So I think the change from being back and forth over email to now being on a system definitely helps.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's got a great function in it. You can send questions to your case officer through the system, and it's brilliant. It comes back within. There's SLAs and things like that. So it's a lot more efficient.
And like you say, it's probably significantly more efficient for them as well.
Yeah, 100%. So it's definitely seen that tighten up a lot. And that's helped them because it makes the rest of the process feel a lot easier. Not easier as in it's easier to comply with, but it just feels a bit more seamless.
Yeah, it's a bit more flow. Like
the flow
is
is much better.
Yeah,
100%,
momentum and all those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And then do you agree, do you think that the financial side as well has kind of become a bit more
It's definitely
robust?
It's more robust.
We seem to get a lot more questions than we used to.
Definitely. And that's really funny, actually, because my last two RFIs have both had questions about the financials.
Yeah.
They definitely have become more robust on the financials. I think one of the biggest misconceptions is I can just get a VARA license.
Yeah.
And we've often talked about one of the things that founders underestimate, and that is the cost of a VARA license.
Yeah.
Not the license itself, but the overall full process. And I think what VARA really want to understand is this VASP stable enough to be operational once licensed, and are the figures they're giving us truly accurate?
Yeah.
Are they inflated? If they're inflated by what X, and why are they inflated? Or if they're under, why are they under? What's going on here? Because some VASPs try and drop their figures, and we're like, doesn't make sense. That's where people like yourself and the team come in, because one of the projects we're working on, there's things that the team have picked up on that I wouldn't. I'm not a financial expert, right? So that's where that working relationship really helps, because we've got SMEs on the financials, we can handle the rest of it. And I think sometimes having somebody else look at the financials separate from the full application really helps. And then when they look at the RBP, they're able to go, okay, right, here's your gaps.
Yeah.
So then that reduces the number of back and forth with VARA, because we've identified things already.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And I think that's the key thing, right, as well, because we are now used to, we're used to working with you guys, you're used to working with us, but B, now we've worked with a lot of VASPs on this process. So we're also kind of used to what we're going to get asked. And, I think that, I remember we got one quite early on, and, the figures were just insane. Like, they were just completely unrealistic numbers, and I remember the guy saying to me, it doesn't matter, they're not going to look at it anyway. And I was like, you couldn't be further from the truth. And I think they've licensed, how many have they done now? 45, 50?
45, nearly 50.
Yeah. So they've also seen some that they haven't licensed, if you know what I mean. So they've also got a track record of understanding what those numbers need to look like. And, if you're expecting people to be here, and then you come up all the way over here, they're going to be like, well, hang on a second.
Yeah. And one thing as well that the financials really helps, I've noticed come up a bit, is headcount.
Yes.
There's a real underestimation sometimes of, okay, you've got one activity, 2 to 3 personnel is fine. If you're going for 2, 3, 4 activities, 3 personnel is not enough.
Yeah.
And obviously that needs to be in the financial projections, in your operational costs, your OPEX.
100%.
And we've often had those questions then of, why is your financial model not reflecting the headcount, or there's an anomaly here.
Yeah, the complexity of the business.
Yeah.
And also people sometimes, especially if they're outside coming in, they don't understand the cost of these things here, right? They don't understand how much it costs to hire an AML officer or,
That's definitely changed a lot from 2022 May to now, current day, we're nearly 4 years on exactly. The cost of a compliance officer, a chief compliance officer, a MLRO has significantly increased. If you're going for somebody that is already experienced with VARA, so they've been through not only the application process, but also the interview with VARA, and they've had the ongoing engagement they've been under supervision by VARA, that individual is going to command significantly more than somebody who is a compliance officer in a traditional finance company who wants to get into the digital asset space.
Yeah.
And I've been having this conversation actually with colleagues in the recruitment industry recently about the increase that has happened. We've got VASPs that are interviewing right now for the said individuals and have had those conversations with me saying, Manpreet, is this realistic? And I'm like, well, it depends on what you want as a VASP, how big you are, what's the complexity of what you're doing. And it is hard to get compliance officers that have been through the full process with VARA, because obviously there are only 40 licensed, right? Yeah. 40 to 50 licensed right now. And there are a lot of people that want to move in the space, you know. But what we find challenging is with clients that come from other jurisdictions, trying to bring individuals over that don't have the right skill set.
Yeah. No, I think that's, you know, I think compliance is a huge area, but there are other areas of the business that are in a similar kind of position, right?
Even like your GM, your CEO, whatever that top level individual who's responsible and accountable for the UAE entity, is them truly understanding what's needed of them. They also need to understand the rule books, but they also need to understand the region and VARA and the ecosystem. And sometimes I think people underestimate how things operate here. Yeah,
and I think that, you know, the difference I've seen is those people that have come here, they've understood the market a bit. They've, you know, they're going through the process. Like, you know, there's some clients that go through the process from outside, right? So they might be based in Europe.
Yeah.
They haven't moved here. They haven't got a team on the ground here, and they're going through the licensing process. And when they're licensed, they'll come here and they'll do whatever they need to do. But they've got no idea of the cultural side. They've got no idea, like you say, of what's right and wrong from a cost perspective, and because they've not put themselves in and lived and breathed it, right? Yeah. Whereas those people that go, do you know what? I'm going to put my life on this, so I'm going to move here, I'm going to understand, I'm going to do this. I find they're much stronger.
Yeah. And they when they come to you already and they're like, okay, I'm in the UK, but the CEO of the entity is already there, that person already knows that they've done their groundwork.
Exactly.
Here. So you're dealing with less combative kind of cultural change. But one thing about neo-legalism, this is one thing I really credit us on, is we really do a lot of knowledge transfer with the VASPs. So the culture, how VARA works, how it is to actually live here and be here and run a business here. There's a lot of knowledge sharing that we do and hand holding, so that the VASP is not so much struck or like, oh my God, what have we done? We kind of keep that journey going all the way along. Because I think if you just let them go with that mentality of, oh, I'll deal with it when we get the license, it's a very, very, very shock to the system.
Yeah, agreed. And just touching on, you mentioned a second ago about people underestimating the cost. You know, obviously ballpark, high level, just to give people an idea. But like, what sort of number do people and timeline do people need to think about? And when I say number, I mean also some of these positions that they need to be hiring for. You know, does somebody need $500,000, $1 million, $2 million? We
always say like $1 million US is a really comfortable number.
And would that cover...
And that's like if you're applying for one activity, maybe two, you can hire your GM, CEO, your Chief Compliance Officer. Your Chief Compliance Officer can be a combined role with your MLRO, but if you choose to hire separate, fine, that will still fall in. And somebody accountable and understanding of the financials. We always think there should be someone strong on the ground who understands the numbers. They're your kind of three key... You know, I know VARA says 2, but I still say 3, because I think sometimes your CEO doesn't want to have the responsibility just for the financials. So then they prefer to have somebody in the team who really spends that's their job, to really focus on it. That also adds in insurance, audit, your bank account, be it operational or operational client money. And then also things like your auditors. So, you know, you've got your technical audit, your financial audit, your compliance audit.
Internal
you
audit,
need to have your internal audit. And then obviously your other costs like marketing and all those things. I think, you know,
so about
your
$1
office.
million is...
I think it's a sensible figure. I think if you're trying to do it in less, you're definitely going to be penny pinching.
Yeah. And timeline wise, where are we sitting on that roughly these?
You know, if you're a very organised VASP, as in you've got your T's crossed, your I's dotted, you could really get your 9 months, I think.
Okay.
But you've got to be on it.
Yeah.
And I always say this isn't VARA or us, this is you. As a VASP, you've got to be on it. You've got to be responsive. We can work as quick as you can. And then, yes, obviously there's time, you know, you work to VARA's SLAs, but 9 months is a really sensible, 9 to 12 months is still a good estimate.
And I guess then touching on that period, like what should, if I'm a VASP and I'm looking to come to the area, like what sort of process, you know, as high level as you can, what sort of process should I be looking at across that 12-month period?
So You're introduced. I'll use us as how we run the process. To be honest, it's easier. VASP is introduced to us. We do our initial introduction call with them. We understand. We can onboard within days, really, frankly. It's then a case of you're looking at your first kind of act is selecting your free zone. Where are you going to set up? We do that as part of our process. And then we'll start working on the IDQ form and the regulatory business plan. We always advise VASPs to start on the regulatory business plan, and then we complete the IDQ following the RBP review. Sometimes that can go through 1 or 2 iterations. Sometimes we go through 3 and 4. It really does depend on how ambitious that the VASP is. Once you've submitted that, we then start work on the regulatory documentation whilst we wait for VARA to review that and come back to us. So the first one you're looking at 2 to 4 weeks, then VARA review. You got your review back within 2 weeks. Now we've been seeing like pretty much within 2 weeks we get a response back on the first submission of the IDQ and regulatory business plan, and then we're working on the documentation. Documentation can take anything from 6 to 12 weeks.
And by documentation,
and we
just
mean
an idea.
your policies and procedures.
Yeah.
So you've got your company documentation, you've got your fit and proper forms, you've got your AML policy, you've got your InfoSec. It's basically all of the documents that are required, policies and procedures and processes to comply with the VARA regulations and requirements. Some of those you won't be able to submit on first go. You may not have already identified your key staff that you're hiring. You will be in process with insurance, because some companies like insurance providers, auditors, they don't want to sometimes engage with you until you've made your submission. Definitely won't until you've got your approval to incorporate, which you'll get off IDQ. But there's some that they prefer to kind of start the conversation, but then won't do anything significant until you've submitted your application. Because then they can say you're so many months away from getting your license. So once we've developed the full documentation stack, in parallel, we're responding to the RFI if we have any from VARA. Once we get RFIs, we respond with the client, and then we will be given the approval to incorporate certificate. That allows you to go back to your free zone, say, right, I can now start incorporating my company and working towards being operational. You can't be operational, but that allows you to get your office space and hire staff. Basically.
And roughly what, from initial call with you to...
ATI?
Yeah.
Approval to incorporate. If everything kind of works on that 4 weeks, you're looking at 2 months.
Okay.
2 to 3 maximum.
Okay. So then you incorporate, go through that process alongside.
Then you're developing your documentation.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Like you should really not waste that time, because the thing is, once VARA give you that approval to incorporate, you have a 12-week mandate. You've got a 12-week deadline from VARA.
Okay.
So we start in advance, use as much of that time as possible, so that when we come to the 12 weeks, we're actually refining the policies and procedures at that point with the VASP. We work with the VASP. So we draft, but we have the VASP really look at them, and we go through it, and we even get the VASP before submission to VARA. We get the VASP to present those documents back to us.
Okay.
So they explain what the VASP has said, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to do it. So it helps prepare them for any questions they might get from the regulator once under supervision. And then basically that process then continues until the point at which VARA say, okay, you are in the in-principle approval stage, so your IPA. And that means you're a number of requirements away, and you've got 30, 60, 90 days to comply with those. And
those requirements being?
Could be you're waiting for your CMA.
Yeah, okay.
It could be your MD can't start because they've got a 3 months notice period, so you'll have a 90-day requirement on that, things like that.
Yeah, and at that point, you can't operate as a business.
No.
But so you're
almost getting operationally
yeah, but
ready.
it is kind of a waiting game a little bit then as to what that. And does anyone ever go from like to get that where let's say they don't get in principle approval? What I mean is that in principle approval, it's like one tiny little thing that takes a week to do, and then they're approved within a week, or like what?
I wouldn't like to say yes, because I think that would be a very unique situation.
Yeah, but it is possible.
It's possible. Anything's possible, right? Anything is possible, but I think more often than not, there's probably like 2, 3, 4, 5, requirements that are, the dependency is not on the VASP. It might be a third party, and therefore that's why there's a delay.
Yeah.
Not a delay, but there's processes they have to go through, and then that's why you've got these conditions before you get operational.
But then at that point, let's say for ease of conversation, let's say it's the MD can't start for 3 months. and then you negotiate a deal and you get him to start within 30 days rather than 90 days, and that's the only condition, just for argument's sake, and you then go to VARA and say, here's the guy, he's started, that they don't have to wait out the extra days. They can go, okay, here's the guy, that's agreed to it.
VARA would then obviously
issue
review
the
that.
license.
They go through their own internal
of course,
steps and process, and then they would issue the
But
license.
it's not like they go...
No, they won't wait till the 90 days. If someone
yeah.
can start and you can comply earlier, fantastic.
Yeah, then great. Okay.
Yeah.
So to break it down then, so we've got the initial kind of IDQ, regulatory business plan, etc. Then we get the approval to incorporate. Then when that's alongside that, now you're incorporating, but at the same time you're reviewing documents and wider, I guess the wider application process. Then you're getting in principle approval, and then you get your full license at the end. And if in theory, if you don't comply in that period, so let's say it's to hire somebody and then they decide after 60 days they're not going to cut them, and then you've got to start that process again.
You can request an extension. There is a fee for that now, but you can request an extension.
So if it's something like that where it's kind of out of your control a little bit,
then you have to request the extension.
Okay. But if you didn't comply within that period, it's completely cancelled and you'd have to start again if you wanted to come back. So let's assume,
you mean if the VASP cancels the full process? Or?
I mean, if like from principal approval to actually being issued the license, if there's reasons that it doesn't go through and you don't get an approval to extend, in theory, if you don't comply within that period after,
I think that's a very unique situation, and
so
that would be a case
unlikely
but I think it'd be a case by case analysis, because you've done so much work.
Yeah.
Right, and VARA are very invested in getting you through to that final stage. So I think it's a case by case basis. I think it'd be very hard to say yes or no. We've not seen that personally on our side. The only kind of things we were dealing with at the end were little things like insurance was going through, bank account. Bank account's always been one that I see so much. But it's a lot better now. I must admit the banking process is much more efficient.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I was just trying to get to the,
unicorns.
But also, is it possible that you get in principle approval, but then for whatever reason you don't comply, and therefore you have to start again? Like that could be a crazy. But
the times where we've seen something not go forward is in phase 1, the IDQ process, because there'll be red flags in that application. Something will come up.
Yeah, okay. So
we've seen
unlikely it's not going to come up until...
Exactly. Anything that really is questioned or is a red flag it's quite easy to pick it out, I think, in phase 1.
Yeah. So
then that's the time where we've seen maybe VASPs drop off.
Yeah, okay.
At phase 1 rather than...
that far down there.
Yeah.
And I could sit here and talk to you about this all day long, but we do need to wrap up in a sec. One thing I just want to touch on before we go is, I like to, make sure we get some actionable points. Maybe you could just in a couple of minutes just give some... I say mistakes, but some really kind of basic kind of stuff that people sometimes don't think about that you would say is a real kind of thing to think about, to take away before they look at applying.
I think they need to understand the effort that's required from them. That is one of the biggest mistakes and misconceptions. We've got examples of where we've got like 15 people from the client side working on the application because they're a bigger organization and they're all invested and they've got really clear roles and responsibilities, to having like 2 people. And then it becomes a second job for those 2 people.
Yeah.
And it's not because there's lots for them to do, but there has to be input from the client. Ultimately, once they're going to their license and they're given their license, yes, we do supervision support and we're working with VASPs on supervisionary support now, but they have to front that relationship. So there needs to be that understanding of what is it they're submitting to the regulator. So one of the biggest mistakes is how much time, and we get frustration from the clients and things like that. So we just kind of explain it, that is one of the biggest misconceptions. Mistakes is where UBO is not upfront and honest. Yeah. That's been, a couple of instances where we've seen that, where you question them as much as you can initially, but then VARA do a background check and find something.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult then to keep, if there's something, be it and the thing is, VARA will look globally, not just in the UAE. So if you're in the UK, if you're in Europe, if you've got a sanction of any kind, if you've got any kind of connections, adverse media, PEPs. It is better that you say, okay, 12 months ago, we had this adverse media.
Yeah.
There was no action or regulatory action because of it, but this is how we dealt with it as a company. What VARA want to see is if something is raised, that you as an individual or as a company address it and put in a process, or you put the right corrective actions in place.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, you're showing a lack of regulatory immaturity basically, and you are showing that you're not taking the regulator seriously. And I think that can damage the relationship very early on. If you're not
it's also a trust thing, right? Do they trust you?
Do they trust you?
It's kind of that, we have it in the tax kind of side where it's like an unprompted or a prompted disclosure. So, have you gone to the tax authorities and said, look, I made a mistake. I owe you some tax. I want to now declare it. How do I do that? There may still be a penalty, but it'll be significantly lower than if they come along and they go, we found this and you didn't declare it. And you go, oh, yeah, I should have told you about that. The penalties on that side are significantly higher. And it's probably there may not be a financial penalty on this side, but it will be a reputational
damage.
Penalty. Yeah.
And you might find that road then becomes blocked.
Yeah.
More often than not, because it's like, well, you're not really serious. So that's something that I think is another mistake. I think the third mistake, like we mentioned, cost, not declaring things properly in the financial forecasting. It leads to more questions and RFIs and things like that. So it's better just to really be sensible about your forecasting from day one and understand what you're doing. There's many mistakes, like little things, misconceptions that come up, but some of the big ones I've mentioned. I think as well is the whole living here situation. You need to be here on the ground. That you can't just get the visa and think that's it. You need to remember you will be inspected. There could be spot checks done. There could be last minute meetings called in person. You need to be here. And I think when you're running a crypto digital assets business, you need to be very close to it, right? So if you're taking on that accountable role, you need to do what it says on the tin. Be accountable, basically. I think there's a bit of a misconception around that. And people make that mistake, I can be here, I can be there. And then they start realizing you can't. It doesn't work.
No.
Unless you've got a bigger team here on the ground and you've got a second in command, fine. But if you're trying to run a lean operation, be compliant but lean, it's not going to work.
It's going to fall apart at some point.
Yeah, very quickly.
Yeah. Look, thank you so much.
Thank you for
your
having
time.
me again.
We'll obviously put everything in the in the show notes, but where can people find you and Neo?
Well, we're in Dubai, in Media City. That's where our office is. We're online. We're on Instagram. You'll see a lot of really good content from us. We talk a lot about very simple, very pragmatic guidance for VASPs. I kind of I'm very keen to make sure that anything I put out there is accessible to everybody, and obviously the engagement with yourselves and stuff. So yeah, and
I like your stuff because you're like me. You try and put educational, useful information, not just sales.
There's a lot out there.
Crap.
There's a lot out there, and there's a lot of sales elements, but it's great to put stuff out there, but is it useful?
Yeah.
And coming from my educational background, I'm very conscious of the industry we work in. We work with a number of diverse people, and it's really important that they actually understand the regulations.
Yeah.
You can hire a lawyer, you can hire a compliance person, great. But if you're that accountable individual, it's good that you have some kind of understanding as to what you're signing up for as well.
100%.
So yeah.
Thank you
so much. Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.